Welcome to Blood and Botany. Jason Chase was found lying on his left side, his legs stretched out with no shoes. The scene was peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep in the quiet gully. There were no signs of trauma and no clear reason that this perfectly healthy 25-year-old man should be lying here dead in New Zealand's Rahine Range just after Christmas. 40 years earlier, two young men, one aged 18 and one 21, hiked the same area on a warm December morning for a day of hunting game. When they were finished, it was getting late, so they quickly packed up and rushed home to beat the sunset. They scrambled through mountainous terrain as the sunlight faded and their adrenaline took over. Getting home was the only thing on their minds. That was until the pain. Seemingly out of nowhere, it was as if their legs were on fire, like they were being stabbed with thousands of tiny needles. Disoriented by the pain, they continued running through the dark woods for an hour, or maybe more. It was impossible to tell how much time had gone by when one of the men collapsed, unable to go on. The pain in his abdomen was now unbearable, and he was having trouble breathing. His vision faded in and out, and he was starting to lose feeling in his limbs. All he could hear was the sound of his friend calling out to him as he slowly lost consciousness. When he came to, he felt the cold forest floor beneath him. He was alone, blind, and completely paralyzed. When compared to its deadly neighbor Australia, New Zealand is a safe haven. No deadly animals and no poisonous spiders are lurking under toilet seats. For this reason, when sheep shearer Jason Chase went missing on December 13, 2002, on a routine trip from Gisborne to his hometown of Dannevirke for Christmas, police and community members immediately raised alarms. The car journey from Gisborne to Dannevirke takes about 5 hours. It's mostly coastal until you reach the Rahine mountain range, going slightly inland for the second half of the journey. Jason hadn't let his family know exactly when he would be arriving home. This is why, in the early days after he was reported missing, they remained hopeful. But when Christmas came and went, everyone knew something was wrong. It wasn't long after he was reported missing that his car was found abandoned. It was sitting undisturbed in the car park of the Tamaki Reserve in the foothills of the Rahine Range, less than 15 minutes from his hometown of Dannevirke. This was at a trailhead, and Jason grew up in the area. He knew these mountains extremely well, and it wasn't unheard of for him to go hiking here. Plus, he was at the time training for an upcoming bike race. Maybe he had gone for a quick hike to stretch his legs. But he had planned to come home for Christmas. Whatever brought him here, it was clear something had gone very wrong. The Rahine Range is dense and rocky, difficult to navigate even in the dry season, but Jason was in excellent shape and familiar with the area. However, weeks went by with helicopters and volunteer search teams finding no trace of him. It wasn't until January 3rd that Jason was finally found. When rescuers arrived at the scene, he was lying on his left side. His legs were stretched out, and he was wearing clean, untattered shorts and a bright striped rugby t-shirt. He wasn't wearing shoes, but his bare feet were completely uninjured, as if he had only just taken his shoes off. There was food in his stomach. He was well hydrated, and there were no signs of trauma to his body. He had been dead, they presumed, for no more than 6 days, and his death was ruled to be on or about December 30th, meaning he had been alive during most of the search operation. But this didn't look like a man who had been struggling to survive in the wilderness for weeks. The autopsy findings were equally puzzling. There were no traces of drugs or toxins in his system, and the only abnormal findings were 2 shallow stress ulcers in his small intestine that had only formed a few hours before his death. The gully where Jason was found is located deceptively close to the gully leading back to the car park where his car was found abandoned, an easy and common mistake even for locals. Had Jason made a wrong turn and gotten lost? That still didn't line up with the autopsy and the scene. A water bottle belonging to Jason was later found in the area, and his backpack and sleeping bag were missing from his car. He knew these trails and had survived for weeks in good health. We don't know exactly what brought Jason into the bush that day, but he was well prepared for more than just a day hike in the backcountry. The pathologist who performed Jason's autopsy was Cynric Temple Camp, a seasoned professional with years of experience in both New Zealand and modern-day Zimbabwe. With no clear answers, he was forced to label Jason's cause of death natural. Jason's family was devastated. They demanded answers, but in the eyes of the government, the case was closed. For Temple Camp, however, Jason's case never quite left his mind. This death, he thought, could not have been natural. For the following 2 decades after he performed Jason's autopsy, he brought it up whenever he had the chance, with colleagues and anyone who would listen. Jason's case was only closed in the legal sense. For Temple Camp, it was still very much unsolved. Over the coming years, he learned small pieces of information, like that local hunters call the area Jason was found Nettle Gully. He interviewed locals and gathered intel and evidence. One day, the name Nettle Gully sparked something deep in the memory of his retired surgical colleague and friend, John Coots, who immediately jumped up and disappeared into his attic before returning with a stack of ancient surgical notes. After a moment of sifting, he thrust a yellowing paper in front of his friend. At the top was the date 1961. The notes detailed a local case, local to the Rahine Range. 2 young men were hunting in the same mountain range on Boxing Day, in the same area Jason had gone missing. As the sun fell, they ran through a bank of tree nettles in their rush to get home. These nettles were a species called Urtica Ferox, meaning fierce itch. It's a native found on the fringes of New Zealand's bush, and has leaves that are covered in rigid 6mm long stinging hairs. At the time of the incident, the men were wearing shorts, just like Jason had been. Soon, one of the men became paralyzed. His friend left him to get help, returning with the rescue team who brought him to a hospital, but tragically he died 5 hours later. These nettles grow in patches in small localities with nutrient-rich soil over several parts of the Rahine Range. They prefer open, non-shady areas like gullies, where the sunlight isn't filtered by canopy. Nettle Gully, where Jason's body was recovered, was absolutely covered in them, plants with poison known to kill horses. In New Zealand's Maori language, these nettles are called by a few names, most commonly anga anga, but also tera anga and tera anga anga, and can grow up to 10 feet tall. Each leaf is covered in stiff, stinging hairs. The older, softer spines on the stems are about as dangerous as rose thorns, but the leaf spines contain trifidin, a potent neurotoxin. And you may be wondering, horses? Why did a plant evolve such a strong poisonous defense? Well, fossil evidence shows it was a favorite snack food of New Zealand's now extinct 12-foot-tall flightless bird, the moa, and developed this very effective defense mechanism to not be munched on. And, much like an anemone to a clownfish, tree nettles are critical to New Zealand's red admiral butterfly population, whose larvae hide within the nettles to evade predators during the daytime. The small caterpillars curl up inside the nettle leaves, pulling foliage over themselves to form a protective tent. And anyone who disturbs them gets a big dose of trifidin toxin. Trifidin contains their neurotransmitters histamine, serotonin, and acetylcholine, but these alone aren't likely the cause of the extreme sensations of pain reported by those who've come into contact with the nettles. This, according to a recent 2022 study, is likely due to neurotoxic and cytotoxic peptides in trifidin that disrupt our cell membranes and ion channels. Fittingly, the toxin got its name from John Wyndham's 1951 post-apocalyptic novel, The Day of the Triffids, which is about carnivorous plants with poisonous stingers who take over the world after humankind is blinded by a meteor shower. And in Wyndham's novel, humankind is absolutely doomed, but in real life, tree nettles can be defeated by more mundane opponents, goats, deer, and badgers, who are immune to trifidin in the same way they're immune to the toxins and weeds like poison ivy. While Jason's case is still technically a closed case and his death ruled natural, it's now widely accepted that it was likely a result of coming into contact with tree nettles after turning into the wrong gully on his way back to his car. His not wearing shoes, for example, can be explained by polyneuropathy caused by trifidin, which leads to a burning sensation, which usually starts in the hands and feet. Still, Jason's final weeks leave many more questions than answers. Throughout my research, I saw many internet theories about what happened to Jason, ranging from missing 411 and alien abduction to undiagnosed medical conditions. These theories often bring up how he looked as if he had been sheltered. On this point, I want to mention that there are a few shelters within the area. The green icons on this map show locations of accommodations, shelters, and campsites. The strangest part of this case is really how long he was alive during the rescue effort without being located. Usually, trail shelters have logbooks for record keeping by caregivers, and in my personal experience working on a trail system, everyone working within the search area would have been notified about a SAR for a missing hiker via radio or other means. When discussing this case with friends recently, they brought up the idea that since many involved in the search effort were Maori hunters, maybe they had avoided areas where they knew there was tree nettle. Also, that Jason may have encountered the nettles at multiple points in his trip, explaining some of his odd behavior, like leaving gear behind along the trail. But for the most part, this case remains a mystery, and death by tree nettle is still just a theory. The only confirmed case from the 1960s left a survivor, after all. While it may be easy to hate Anga Anga after the story, it is an amazing plant and not just a nursery for the red admiral butterfly. Maori have used the plant as medicine for hundreds of years for pain relief in conditions like eczema, as well as many diseases. Today, scientists are investigating whether it can be used as a non-addictive alternative to opioids for chronic pain, and the current research is extremely promising. This is a plant that could potentially have a major impact on the current opioid crisis. Local and indigenous knowledge is incredibly valuable for investigations like Jason's, and I wonder how many other cases could be solved or even prevented using interviews like Temple Camp conducted so many years later. My thoughts go out to Jason's family, friends, and I hope Temple Camp's findings brought some closure to this tragic outcome. If you found this video interesting, please consider liking and subscribing. If you have any thoughts about this case, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear them, and it helps fertilize YouTube's algorithm so more people can find me. Thanks again for watching Blood and Botany.